What Mercedes just did is shocking, and we're going to be going through that and 4 other stories in today's video. So don't forget to like this video, and if you want more Mercedes F1 content like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hitting that red button down below. But let's get straight into the first story, where Mercedes just did something very shocking. The DNA of the Mercedes will change for the 2023 Formula 1 season, even if the bodywork appears similar, according to team principal Toto Wolff. Mercedes adopted a radical zero-pod concept this year, the first of sweeping new technical regulations, which has coincided with it being toppled from its perch as constructors world champions for 8 years in a row. The Brackley-based outfit has gradually made up ground over the course of the 2022 season, although it still trails second place Ferrari by 53 points in the constructor standings with 3 rounds remaining. After bringing updates to the most recent Grand Prix of the season, that of the United States, Wolff says that the most significant changes for next year will be under the skin. "I think the DNA of the car is going to change for next year, that's clear," he stated. "It doesn't necessarily mean that the bodywork is going to look very different, but certainly what is part of the DNA of the architecture will change for next year." Lewis Hamilton finished second at the Circuit of the Americas, having taken over the lead after a drama in the pits for eventual winner Max Verstappen. If it was the United States Grand Prix, that a straight line deficit to Red Bull was still apparent, something which Wolff attributed to the relatively high drag of the W13 and the restrictions imposed by the cost cap. "I think with our car, it's just draggy overall, and it's something that we need to figure out for next year," he admitted. "And cost cap played a role. We can just produce infinite amount of low drag bits or spend a lot of time in the wind tunnel to come up with solutions, so it's for next year." The Austrian did, however, say that its performance in Texas proved that the updates were a step forward. "I think that Lewis in Austin is a banker. I bought that an upgrade. I think we've seen that in terms of performance," noted Wolff. "Maybe we expect sometimes too big, but it was respectful where we were on the weekend. It was respectful in qualifying." He added, "As long as the trajectory is upwards, it's like the share price, there will be ups and downs." The Formula 1 season continues this weekend with the Mexico City Grand Prix. I think that it is going to be interesting to see how this all plays out, but I love how they talk about, what is to come for the future for Mercedes, especially coming to next season, which is something Lewis Hamilton wants to get done and finally win that next Drivers' Championship. Now, speaking of all this, the next story we're going to get into is Hamilton revealing the issue that has plagued Mercedes all year. And this is something that came to a lot of people's mind due to the fact that Mercedes definitely had a chance for Lewis Hamilton to break some records. Now, it's no secret that W13 has been one of the most difficult car Mercedes has worked with since rejoining the grid in 2010. It is a car that has ended their 8-year dominance as constructors world champions, and having suffered the most from the porpoising phenomenon that has been unintended consequence of the 2022 regulations. As evidenced by Max Verstappen's win at the United States Grand Prix and at previous races this season, the car has also suffered from lack of straight line speed. While Lewis Hamilton tried hard to maintain a gap to Verstappen, he ultimately had to concede to the superior pace of the RB18 with less than 10 laps to go. Now, in the minutes prior to the race, Mercedes mechanics were seen frantically doing the work at the front of Hamilton's car with the brakes, and it subsequently emerged that the team had to swap his brake material, also including calipers and pads, after noticing an imbalance between the front brake performance. Speaking to media after the race, Hamilton explained how the team has been dealing with brake separation for most of the season. "We've had problems with our brakes all year. Just with separation, basically," Hamilton said. "When you hit the brake, instead of the both fronts doing the same amount of work, either the left one or the right one does a bit more because one gains more temperature than the other. We had a huge temperature split, which was basically the left one wasn't really working, so they had to change the brakes. Alongside the increased reliance on the floor to generate downforce, the 2022 cars also have an 18-inch tires to enable better road relevance. The knock-on effect teams mean that have needed to adapt their baked drums, which is the main cause of the problem, according to Hamilton. It's something we've seen a lot through this year with these new bigger drums," he explained. "So it's something we're looking at fixing." I think this is very important to really understand what was going on this year, because that is going to set them up for a great season next season. Especially when it comes to Lewis Hamilton, who does have a lot on the line, and he is looking to break some records, especially Schumacher's. I think it honestly is fantastic to see that they have actually, pinpointed the problem and are really trying to fix it for next season. It did cause a lot of problems, and I think one of the main issues was definitely the porpoising as well. When you look at the porpoising, it happens so far often in the first couple of races this season that it really set Mercedes too far back for them to make any catch up, especially with Red Bull continuing to do what they do best. test. Now, why Mercedes' were experimental front wing caused a stir in Texas, and this is something that a lot of people did not understand. Now, Mercedes brought a new front wing to the Circuit of the Americas, which caused a certain amount of discussion about whether or not it complied with the regulations. The original intention was to debut the wing this coming weekend in Mexico, and it was brought to Austin just as a free practice test in item to order to complete its correlation process. Now, one of the reasons why I think they actually did bring it out a bit more earlier, even though there is a little bit of speculation whether it complies with regulations, is due to the fact of the cost cap breach by Red Bull and the FIA doing absolutely nothing about it. I honestly have talked about this time and time again, but I honestly think the championship should have been given to Lewis Hamilton due to the cost cap breach. Yes, it may not have anything significant, but the extra couple of million that they did have to spend, if Mercedes definitely spent that, I definitely think they could have won at Abu Dhabi. But its distinctive appearance with a series of 5 enlarged slot gap separators seems to have alerted at least one rival team, who then queried the wing with the FIA. And this is where it got really interesting. Before the wing was created, it went through the normal process of being submitted to the FIA technical department in CAD, so computer aided design drawing form. At this point, the FIA will enter approve the component's use or say why it believes it does not conform. However, even if it gives consent for the component to be used, the FIA technical department is not the official judge of the compliance. Such decision fall to the race stewards, and so just because a component has been passed does not make it immune from other teams questioning the FIA about its legality, and that is what is happening here. But what is the controversy all about? It's all about the centers around the new slot gap separator arrangement, and whether the primary use of this is to maintain the gap between the two wing elements, or whether they're actually there to outwash more of the car's airflow around the front tires. Of course, they can quite conceivably be doing both, which is where the subtle distinction about the primary use comes in. And if they are adjudged to be the primary to increase the outwash, it would be rather against the aim of the 2020 rules of creating cars with less disruptive aerodynamic wake. But like we've talked about before, I think when it came to Toto Wolff and what has actually been, said about the cost cap breach, I think Toto Wolff just does not care. He's going to do what he wants, and if he gets fined from the FIA, he doesn't even care about that as well. Now, Mercedes technical director Mike Elliott commented in it, and he actually said clearly there's a second benefit of the aerodynamic design, but the regulations in the case do not state sole purpose but primary purpose. So I think there's an argument to be had. Whether we want to have it is another question. Now, moving on to the next story, Mercedes chief heats back at Red Bull boss over cost cap defense, saying victims are the 9 teams. Mercedes boss Toto Wolff hit back at the Red Bull team principal Christian Horner claims at the 2022 F1 United States Grand Prix press conference. Horner refused to plead guilty to the 2021 cost cap breach and attacked several teams' statements. The Red Bull's principal assertiveness, however, is not convincing, according to Toto Wolff, as reported by F1 briefings. He actually continued to say, "I almost had to squeeze out a tear when I heard that Horner statement. The fact that there are 9 out of the 10 teams were under the cost cap. One team is now arguing that they slipped over it with supposed non-performance topics, but these apply to all of us. We at Mercedes also thought about how many sandwiches we give people and how we deal with various other cost pools." And I think there's something to definitely work out, because if the FIA is just going to fine them just a little bit, then it's going to cause a lot of these bigger teams to just say, whatever, and just breach the cost cap, if it does make their car better. Now, the Mercedes executive did not buy Red Bull's philosophy of not gaining an unfair advantage last year, and Wolff was clear with his opinion. Whatever they're over $1 million, 2 or 5, I don't know, is a cash value advantage that you can put into development. It's a little bit like a reverse psychology. Who is the victim? And I believe the victim are the 9 teams. I do completely agree with that. The 9 teams that did comply, that did follow the rules, they are honestly, getting taken advantage of due to these other teams such as Aston Martin and Red Bull taking advantage and breaking the cost cap. Now, Red Bull's cost cap breach is reported to be in 4 different areas with no proof of a development advantage. However, Mercedes did raise objections towards the Milton Keynes-based team's rapid developments in 2021. Red Bull raised eyebrows over an ex-Mercedes employee handling the cost cap breach. Christian Horner raises doubts against Toto Wolff's knowledge of Red Bull's 2021 breach prior to the FIA's confirmation. Since then, Red Bull are reportedly not happy with the Shayla and Rao, an ex-Mercedes company's employee acting as the FIA's interim director. However, the Silver Hour's boss claims that there's nothing to worry about praising Shala-Ann Rao, and he said for Shala-Ann, she was at the FIA before she joined us. She was chief executive officer of one of the largest agencies before, and the positive of having Shala-Ann in the position is she's wanted about the governance and transparency. Toto Wolff continued saying, she's a lawyer. I think there's something we have always criticized in the past, that things weren't always as transparent and as clear for the teams. This is one of the key topics she will be trying to implement, and that is good news for all teams. As the Formula One fraternity awaits the Milton Keynes-based team's punishment, it'll be interesting to see how the whole situation pans out. The FIA, however, definitely faces the pressure of penalizing Red Bull heavily. So I think this is honestly interesting to see, and when it comes to what is going on, especially for the Mexico Grand Prix, it is going to be interesting to see if Mercedes can pull it off and if Lewis Hamilton can finally get his first win this season. So thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you soon. Peace.